What's up, fine people? I want to talk about the future of Ghost Recon. It's supposed to be a tactical shooter. Almost every game is supposed to have precise controls so that the player can properly manage their avatar, increasing immersion and raising the skill ceiling. Combine those two things and it explains why Ghost Recon should have manual leaning. Automation tends to ruin players' control. From automatic leaning to cover systems, Ubi has implemented magnetism that attracts the avatar but repels hardcore players. There is not much worse in a game than fighting against the controls and unwanted, quote, assists, unquote. I would rather fail on my own than succeed by the game stealing control. If you've been watching this series, you will know that I keep mentioning 4 games. Those are what I call the classic Tom Clancy shooters. They set a precedent and standard that Ubi has since abandoned, and that's a big shame. There are not many IPs that I care about, however, Ubi holds the rights to at least 3 of them: Splinter Cell, Rainbow Six, and Ghost Recon. They have ruined all 3 of those series. Manual leaning was not in the original Rainbow Six. It was added in the second game and was called peeking. It was also in the rest of the classic Tom Clancy shooters. Leaning/peeking has taken multiple forms in Tom Clancy shooters, from fluid leaning in Rainbow Six 3 to tiptoes or standing fully erect in GRAW 2 on PC, from third-person nonsense of Rainbow Six Vegas to automatic leaning and automatic cover in Breakpoint. As far as Ghost Recon is concerned, peeking has degraded similar to most other things in the series. Ghost Recon 2's camera gun was amusing, but GRAW 2 on PC probably has the best peeking system in the series. When Ubi forced Ghost Recon to play more like Gears of War, it was a huge downgrade. At least in Future Soldier, it was manual, allowing players to avoid the cover system. The automatic cover system feels horrible and is ridiculous, especially when the animations and thus functions are not tactical. Having the avatar slightly move behind concealment when not aiming would be one thing. Snapping and locking onto objects is another very bad thing. The automatic leaning also feels bad and ruins aim in Wildlands. The magnetism ruins both movement and aim. It can prevent the player from escaping. It can make foot movement tedious as the avatar keeps wasting time by needlessly snapping to and unsnapping from cover. It can make shooting ridiculous, spending time spinning and peeking farther than necessary. Certainly the system is horrible for skilled players, but it also seems bad for unskilled players, with the only benefit being arbitrary invulnerability. It simply doesn't belong in a tactical shooter, especially one with the Tom Clancy name attached to it. Animations seem to be the main reason for the third-person perspective, and the magnetism makes the animations look silly. Even if they were to stop making the avatar put its side or back to the cover, the magnetism is still ridiculous. Do I even need to say anything for the realism section? Sure, leaning in games is typically a bit unrealistic in some ways, especially the animations. However, peeking is a very real and useful tactic. When it comes to tactical shooters, its absence has been flagrant to me since Rainbow Six 2. It even seems wrong to not exist in stealth games since Thief. Undeniably, being able to choose when you peek is more realistic than it occurring automatically, and it is realistic to peek without aiming down sights. If you think leaning animations are unrealistic, you should think the animations found in cover systems are much worse. In modern Ghost Recon titles, the avatar places its back against the wall, requiring a nearly 180-degree turn before shooting. Rainbow Six Vegas. Never mind. The point is that the animations look worse and less realistic in modern Ghost Recon titles than they did in Ghost Recon 1. If it's gonna look bad regardless, we should have the realism of choosing when the movements occur and have the realistic tactics in both visuals and gameplay. Plus, the animations can be made to look just as realistic with manual leaning as it can with automatic leaning, except it looks as realistic as you want it to because it doesn't happen at illogical times. Ditch the automatic cover system and add manual leaning if you want realism. I don't want to hear anything about how manual leaning is not going to work for console gamers. I already devised a gamepad scheme that includes manual leaning and many other tactical controls that don't exist in the recent games. The scheme allows for basic, shallow control for casual players who don't care much about tactics. However, it also contains depth for hardcore players who want to be strategic and tactical. You can manually lean leftward, rightward, and forward, or contextually. It could even have a fluid lean instead of the lean forward, allowing for minimal exposure. I'll start this section by defining two terms. Casual gamers are those who want things to be simple, shallow, and streamlined. They typically play generic games that are easy. They want low skill floors. Hardcore gamers want things to be deep, difficult, and dynamic. They typically play games that are niche or unique. They want high skill ceilings. Controls are the nucleus of gameplay. For hardcore gamers, there is not much more annoyance to be found in games than with bad controls. We want to have consistency, predictability, and authority. Automatic leaning is unpredictable. We want to control the avatar. Tom Clancy shooters are supposed to be for hardcore gamers. Manual leaning is almost a necessity. For third-person gaming, leaning is not as important, as you can peek without exposing yourself. That is anti-tactical. However, especially if there is good AI, leaning can still be useful in third-person for when you want to shoot. Also, it is possible for the game to not draw people that cannot be seen by the avatar. That would drastically make third-person more tactical. In first-person, leaning is important for peeking and shooting, allowing players to expose themselves as conservatively as possible. Gameplay gets annoying when the avatar is doing things that you don't want. That is why automatic cover and leaning are horrible systems. They frequently cause players to take damage or die. That's extremely bad in a tactical shooter with high lethality, as Ghost Recon should be. The automation could also ruin stealth if the bots are properly programmed. Leaning is an authentic tactic, and players should be the ones to choose when it occurs. Typically, there's too much roll in animations for leaning. Those animations would be improved by being more lateral. Also, the avatar should be making itself a minimal target. With these two considerations, a very realistic and useful leaning animation could be created. Perhaps a contextual lean could limit exposure by detecting nearby objects. That sounds like some genuinely next-gen stuff. Since I'm not sure if I'll do a lecture on gunplay, I'll say that contextual animations could also detect what's in front of the barrel with a short raycast. If the barrel is blocked and the player is aiming, it would try to aim around the obstruction. Yes, that would be a slight automation. It's worth the experiment, though. Earlier, I mentioned my control scheme for gamepads. It uses right bumper for leaning rightward and swapping the firearm to the right shoulder. Left bumper does the opposite. Holding both simultaneously will lean forward, useful for peeking through thresholds or over ledges, especially if combined with the free look feature. However, the leaning could be contextual, based on surroundings, allowing for very realistic visuals and gameplay, limiting exposure to threats and providing players the ability to peek over and around cars or other obstacles with only their eyes unless they are aiming. As far as I'm aware, such a system would be groundbreaking and make UB more like what it used to be. Holding both bumpers could instead be a fluid lean, which makes the left stick control the direction. It could instead lean upward or downward. Upward seems more logical. It could instead be an incremental stance system, allowing for granular control of crouching and leaning by using the left stick. Double tapping the right bumper would cause the avatar to sidestep to the right. If you've played Arma 3, you might have an idea of what that would be like. If you do that while prone, it would be a roll if you don't have gear blocking that. Left bumper is the opposite. If holding both bumpers is used for incremental stances, double tapping one bumper could be freed for other things such as spinning 180 degrees in that direction or commanding the selected soldiers to flank. Double tapping both bumpers at once would cycle the perspective from true first person, as seen in Arma 3, to third person locked to the head, as seen in Breakpoint, to third person locked to the body, as seen in Wildlands. The control scheme is extremely powerful and deep, just as Ghost Recon should be. Of course, on keyboard, all of the optional stuff I listed could exist. There could be a key to move the stance downward and another key for upward, with tiptoe and flattening maneuvers on each extremity. I'm simply explaining that even if Ubi chooses to be foolish and force parity between the consoles and PC, between gamepads and keyboards, it is still not a good excuse to exclude manual leaning. Leaning and peeking are core elements of military tactics. Classic Tom Clancy shooters have set the precedent, and nearly 30 years later, that standard must be reached, if not improved. Even if we were to only get leaning as it exists in Ghost Recon 1, it would still be worth having. Gamepads are not a good excuse for not having manual leaning. There are plenty of options that allow the functions to work on gamepads. Cover systems are horrible and inappropriate for Ghost Recon, especially when they're automatic. Players should be in control. Leaning is beneficial to both first and third-person perspectives. Ghost Recon belongs in first, but benefits from third person. If I could peek into Ubisoft's studio, I would tell them to commit to making a tactical shooter with precise controls and deep mechanisms. Embrace a high skill ceiling. Lean into making Ghost Recon again.